Welcome again to the second annual conference of the Gearing Roles project hosted by the Sabancı University Gender and Women Studies Center of Excellence, SUGender. Gearing Roles, Gender Equality Actions in Research Institutions to Transform Gender Roles, is designing, implementing, and monitoring 6 gender equality plans at European higher education and research institutions. Our project is funded by the European Commission as part of the Science with and for Society program. Our first conference was last year in Lisbon, hosted by our colleagues at the University of Lisbon Institute of Geography and Spatial Planning. The third conference, the next conference, will be in Estonia next November, to be hosted by the Estonian Research Council. Well, this year's theme is gender and leadership. And without further ado, let me invite our first speaker, Athanasia Moungou, Policy Officer at the European Commission, Directorate General for Research and Innovation, to give her welcome speech. We are grateful to have her here. Thank you very much, Athanasia. The floor is yours now.
Sorry, I just realized that I was muted. Thank you very much for the kind invitation. I'm very happy to be here with you today. I have prepared a couple of slides, not to bother you. Is it? I'm sorry. Okay, here it is. Can you see the slides?
Yes, we can.
Thank you very much. So I really like also the title of the conference, the title of the conference today, which is about gender and leadership in higher education and research. And with this, I would just like to give you a very brief overview of the current policy context at the European Union level. So, for example, we know that gender equality is very high on the agenda of the new leadership. We also have, which is also reflected at the very high political level. We have a new commissioner even for equality for the first time. And we also have Maria Gabriel, who is the Commissioner for Innovation, Research, Culture, Education, and Youth. And just a very brief overview of gender equality in the European research area, which was one of the priorities under the communication that was adopted back in 2012. So back from then, gender equality and gender mainstreaming in research was one of the priorities, and we had 3 objectives. You know that those were to have gender equality in scientific careers at all levels, having gender balance in decision-making bodies, and of course, integrating the gender dimension in research and innovation content. So since then, we had one common approach, which was to achieve institutional change. So that means that the goal was to fix the system and not just the numbers. And if we have a look at the latest data from the She Figures publication, which is one of the flagship publications of the European Commission, we can see that there is still quite some room for improvement. For example, when we have a look at PhD graduate level, we can see that there is even parity between women and men. There is a parity between women and men. There is women make up 48%, but then as we go higher in the academic ladder, we can see that the gender gap is becoming wider. For instance, top-level researchers at grade A positions, which is the equivalent of full professorship positions, women make up only 24% of the total workforce. And of course, this also applies for women authors, which women authors make only 32%. And if we even talk about the women inventors and that register for patent publications, the numbers are even lower. That means that we're even at less than 10%. So we have made quite some progress up to now, but we still see that there is quite some room for improvement. So all of this, now the previous months, they were quite busy in terms of new actions, and we had a recent communication of the European Research Area that was adopted at the end of September, where we have a new action for gender equality to strengthen the European research and innovation potential. So we had a specific action calling the Commission to propose as of the next year, as of 2021, the development of inclusive gender equality plans with member states and stakeholders, which is also you, in order to promote EU gender equality in research and innovation. So that means that the gender equality plans that the European Commission has been funding for quite some time now will become an eligibility criterion for Horizon Europe applicants, and this will concern public bodies, research organizations, and secondary and higher education institutions. And just to say that this action is also fully in line with the ambition of the new European Commission's gender equality strategy that will be implemented until 2025. And for the first time, it was mentioned the possibility for Horizon Europe applicants needing to have a gender equality plan into place. What I also wanted to say is that when we talk about inclusiveness, inclusive gender equality plans, first of all, we mean we want to have geographic inclusiveness in the sense that we leave no one behind. We want all the countries to be eligible to apply. We also need to have to open up to intersections, to consider social categories that may be as a basis for discrimination, such as taking into account sexual orientation, disabilities, and we also need to be inclusive in the sense that we also need to have the private sector on board. So there needs to be synergies between research, academia, and the private sector and entrepreneurship. And we have been in full consultation and full co-creation mode with our projects, like gearing roles and other relevant stakeholders that helped us define what should be the minimum building blocks that each gender equality plan should entail. So for this, we decided and we all work together to see that, for example, a gender equality plan needs to be a public document. That means that it has to be a formal document that is signed by the top management. And of course, it has to be published on the institution's website and be disseminated within the whole institution. There need to be dedicated resources for a gender equality plan. That means that there needs to be earmarked funding. And of course, we need to have data collection and monitoring. We have been trying to push to have more sex and gender disaggregated data across all staff categories in Europe, because this also to give us a better understanding of what is happening. For example, there also needs to be annual reporting on gender imbalances and having a comprehensive evaluation approach. And as a final building block, we have training and capacity building to tackle, for instance, unconscious gender bias among staff and decision makers. This can also be some training in terms of unconscious bias and to tackle discrimination and gender stereotypes. This is just a very brief overview of what has been happening for the past years and what is also new to come for Horizon Europe, the next framework program for research and innovation. I would also like to invite you to check regularly the updates that we have on our policy page on gender equality. And finally, I would also like to tell you that the GEAR tool, which stands for Gender Equality in Academia and Research, that was co-developed by IG and DG Research and Innovation, provides step-by-step guidance for implementing gender equality plans in research organizations. And it's currently being updated. You can also have a look at this QR code where you can also find more examples, concrete examples on best practices that actually build on the projects that have been funded under FP7 and Horizon 2020 projects like gearing roles. And of course, if you have any other questions, you can always contact us at RTD gendering research at ec.europa.eu. And for this, I will stop sharing my screen, and I'm looking forward to the next discussions that we will have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Athanasia, Moungou. Thanks for coming. Thanks for this brief overview of the policies, and it's very exciting to hear about what's coming next. Our next speaker is Meltem Müftüler. Meltem Müftüler is the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, Professor of International Relations, and Jean Monnet Chair at Personam at Sabancı University. We're honored to have her welcome you to this conference on gender and leadership as a prominent women leader herself. Thank you, Professor Müftüler. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Gülru. That's very kind. I'm very happy to be here, of course. And I'm, beyond the fact that, I'm a female researcher myself, to be, involved in such an important project in providing some kind of, let's say, at least, an example, a model for the younger generation is critical. Now, before I go, further with regards to what I want to say about, our institution and the way that, our own leadership looks into the way that women researchers play in universities, let me share a few points that I would like to stress that maybe we can actually continue discussing during the rest of the conference as well. Now, since we are discussing research and the way that female researchers play a role in the larger European research area, there are pros and cons into the way that we can actually conceptualize this issue. And this is something that I always tell my own PhD students, that most of the academic career, well, all of the academic career steps that we actually take are very much driven by our research activities. And unlike other types of work, like in banking or in the political sector, what we do in research is generally invisible and unrelated to our gender. What I mean by that is this: when researchers send an article to a journal, once you get through the desk rejection and the editor might know your gender, the referees don't. So this is actually to have this type of an anonymity, or to be rather genderless in the research community. Once you send your articles, your research to these outlets, is actually a blessing of some kind. But it's also a blessing it becomes a blessing once you can actually come to that stage. What I mean by that is this: Athanasia talk has stressed some of the points as well. But what is important is not actually when you look at the number of publications or the way that female researchers could get their outputs recognized. Female researchers' submissions themselves are low. That's because the burden or the types of things that women researchers or non-binary researchers do is a bit different than let's say a male researcher does. And to give you a direct example from let's say my life, I'm also married to a male academic for the past 27 years. The way that he can put together his papers and then send them off, and the way that the time that I have to do the same thing is a bit different, because a lot of things that a female researcher has to take care of, normally a male researcher does not have the same responsibility or the same feeling of involvement. Now, that doesn't mean that my partner is not contributing. No, it just means that, and in a lot of households, that's not the case at all. So what actually this means is that the articles that women researchers are able to write has a, it has a restriction with regards to the time that is available to them. So, this is something important for me in the way that I'm evaluating all the researchers at our faculty. And I'm also looking at, for example, if a male researcher is able to send off, let's say, 5 papers in a year, normally a female researcher is able to do that only, half of that. That's because of the burdens that we actually carry, that involves taking care of people, that involves child raising, that involves everything that that you need to think about in running your daily life as well. So I think there is, and this is something that's important even further now, because the pandemic has already created a situation that women researchers are now doing so much stuff at home that they're even more disadvantaged had there been no pandemic. And the repercussions of that we will see in a few years' time. So it's no coincidence that, while their work is becoming less intense, we also see a number of other, in other sectors, women dropping out of the workforce in its entirety. So that in return means that we need actually leadership, well, specifically either female leadership or leadership that could actually recognize the obstacles and the hardships that women researchers are facing, both in normal life without the pandemic, but now together with the pandemic as well. Again, to give another example here from our university, we are encountering a very different work environment. And that actually means that work has now become a 24/7 occupation. I'm receiving emails at 1 o'clock in the morning, which requires responses in about, 6 or 7 hours. So one of the things that I try to do, I just became the dean 3 months ago, is this. I tell the upper management that any email that I receive after 6 o'clock, I might read it. I might actually have the answer for it too, but I will not going to answer it immediately until the next day. More importantly, I also tell them that when they try to contact my own administrative staff here, I have 6 people who are working in our faculty with me, and they're all women. And I tell them that if you want to get a response from them at 12 o'clock at night, you need to ask my permission first. Now, this is something that is completely new to some people, because they are accustomed to sending, this is also in the European context, something different, because in the in EU countries, you are not supposed to send work-related stuff after 6 o'clock, after the actual work is supposedly over. Whereas, at our institution, or in our culture, also in the American culture too, work is continuous. And to have this continuity in work, and we actually, the way that we try to do work is also continuous, but I think it's detrimental to specifically women researchers, because they have to balance out so many things all at the same time. And that also creates this expectation. If you're unable to keep up with that, then you're not actually, productive. That brings this automatic, unexpected result that, you receive an email at 11 o'clock, and if you don't respond by 11:30, you're not taking your work seriously. So this is something that I'm trying to change as part of the work culture here. But I think it's also part of the way that academia has also worked over the years, not only, with the work and life balance that I'm trying to stress, but also with the fact that there is not a recognition of the so many details that women are expected to take care of, without considering its impact on their actual scientific output. Now, there are already certain rules that the European Commission has adopted. Some of the scientific councils that we have in Turkey are doing that as well. They're adding this extra year to women's research performance if they have had kids, but only having 1 year added, I think, means nothing, because, once you have children, once you have, it doesn't even have to be children, women are also taking care of their elderly parents as well. The whole expectation of what women generally do is not reflected onto their research evaluations. So that, I think, is one of the biggest challenges in the way that men and women perform differently in academia. And that's also one of the probably underlying reasons why we see less women as you go up in the upper ranks of academia, because of the magnitude of the work that they have to do. A lot of them drop out during the process. So graduate school, you know, when you look at graduate students, you actually see more or less an equal distribution, at least in certain fields, maybe not in STEM fields, but as they move out of the graduate school and move, you know, try to get into academia, that actually changes. And you've seen Athanasia's figures as well. In the Turkish case, it is less so, but nonetheless, there are large similarities. So this conference, therefore, I think, is a very important turning point, at least, to discuss some of these underlying issues that we normally take for granted, and these underlying issues that have created these deep divisions within the academic world, within the scientific world as well, on a gender-based differentiation that requires significant action to be taken at the leadership level to make a lot of the academic policies, scientific research evaluation, performance criteria, let's say, more gender friendly. I don't like the word gender friendly that much, but that's just what I try to, I think it conveys the message. So, you know, I'm very hopeful that we will be finding new alternatives and at least have this dialogue among ourselves that we could actually take into a more action-oriented plan as well. So this project's, one of the end results is this project is going to produce this gender action equality plan, for which a number of steps have already been taken at our institution and the participating institutions, is actually a right step towards that direction. So that's all I have to say. And I wish all of us a very fruitful conference and lots of good ideas to come out from this 3-day conference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Meltem Müftüler, for joining us and for this very insightful speech and for reminding us about the gendered effects of the pandemic on women researchers, especially. Well, as I said before, the conference is hosted by the Sabancı University Gender and Women Studies Center of Excellence, SUGender. I now invite Hülya Adak, the director of SUGender and faculty member in Cultural Studies and Gender Studies at Sabancı University, to give her welcome remarks.
Thank you very much, Guru, for the introduction. Dear colleagues, fellow activists, teachers, trainers, students, I'd like to welcome you all to the online international conference, Gender and Leadership in Higher Education and Research Institutions. I would like to thank our Dean, Meltem Müftüler, for the wonderful speech. And I've been the director of SUGender for the past year, and I can tell you all that our lives and our tasks have become much easier after first Ayşe Kadıoğlu, of course, but then Meltem Müftüler took over leadership in our faculty. As the current SUGender director and a scholar who spent roughly 2 decades at Sabancı University, I'd like to articulate a few words about SUGender and where we stand, and the road leading to the Gearing Roles Horizon 2020 project that my colleagues Ayşegül, Altınay, Guru Göker, and İlayda Eceova launched roughly 2 years ago at Sabancı University. Since the early and humble beginnings of the Cultural Studies program in the early 2000s at Sabancı, gender was a very important component, both of in-class teaching and of activism outside the classroom. The many 8th of March International Women's Days panels, film screenings, discussions, our very own feminist play on women's sexuality that was published in 2 languages, in Turkish and German, İşte Böyle Güzelim, So Ist Das Meine Schöne, which we're also planning to publish in English, in the early years of our university led to a nationwide project, a gender and sexuality training program for high school teachers all over Turkey that was also certified by the Ministry of Education for extensive periods of time. This project, this program called the Purple Certificate Program, was an offshoot and a continuation of a UNJP project. And at Sabancı, it developed into an amazing program for sharing experiences and working in an interdisciplinary fashion. For the past 13 years, the program has been persistently supported by the Sabancı Foundation, and we're actually making the program grow into a program that embraces more and more high school teachers and continues in online form during the COVID crisis. In 2007, together with incentives from student organizations on campus and grassroots organization at the university level, a group of scholars and administrators from all disciplines and units wrote up Sabancı University's sexual harassment policy. This was the first policy of its kind in institutions of higher education in Turkey. The Sexual Harassment Committee has worked diligently for the past 13 years to struggle against all forms of discrimination and to construct an environment of gender equality, anti-discrimination, inclusion, and pluralism. Our efforts to continue building this environment ensued in the establishment of the Gender Forum first, and later SUGender, a Center of Excellence for Gender and Women's Studies. Together with this amazing Horizon 2020 project, you know, the conference of which we're a part of right now, we have 2 other ongoing Horizon projects, a number of Marie Curie postdoctoral fellowships, Coast Action Networks, Newton projects funded through the British Academy, exclusively under the center. The research and outreach projects span the fields of women's, gender, and sexuality studies, as well as migration studies, memory and trauma studies, literature, performance, and film studies, and medical anthropology and disability studies. We are trying to move into the direction of climate justice with new projects and new training programs. Besides the many activist projects, such as the Purple Certificate Program, transformative activism constructed around self-healing tools for activists, and Curious Steps, which you might have actually heard a discussion, a panel of, our gender and memory walks. We also have a multitude of awards at the graduate and postdoctoral levels that we give to scholars engaged in gender and sexuality studies. Our work has taken a new spin with the Gearing Roles project, in that together with our team's efforts, Ayşegül, İlayda, and Guru, we have started transforming the culture of Sabancı University as an institution. Since the project favors a bottoms-up approach, our internal gender task forces, made up of a heterogeneous group of administrators, instructors, scholars alike, have come up with a myriad of different ideas and action plans that will contribute to an overall gender action plan for the entire university. This has been revolutionary, and this project serves to fulfill the mission of our center. Rather than remaining a center that operates marginally and independently of the university, we're dedicated to radically transforming the university and the people belonging to this institution. And it's wonderful to see that this transformation will take place as a result of the brainstorming sessions organized under the auspices of the Gearing Roles project, where we came together to think, dream, and move onward toward a more egalitarian future of gender justice. Further, through the international networks we established with Gearing Roles, many international scholars have already contributed and will contribute to our ongoing webinars, such as the famous Sexual Harassment and Gender-Based Violence in Academia series. We thank all who have participated in these webinars, and we hope to publish our discussions and our research on these issues in the near future. Obviously, we're going through a very historic moment right now, and Dean Meltem Müftüler has talked about some of the challenges. We have had a very exciting moment over the weekend through the Biden-Harris victory, and where Harris, in her speech, inaugural speech, poignantly actually mentioned that she might be the first female Black South Asian vice president-elect, but she's certainly not going to be the last. And I think we are on a mission, all of us, to make sure that female leadership, feminist leadership, and diversity becomes the norm for decades to come. But most importantly, what Dean Müftüler was mentioning, the COVID crisis, is something that I hope we'll be able to broach in some of the discussions we're going to have in the next few days. There are obviously serious challenges, serious inequalities, particularly in the field of gender, that arise from the COVID crisis. And they might be resolved by, as Ardeen said, by thinking about gender-sensitive leadership or female leadership, but we might also be able to come up with alternative models. And I think it would also be great to address new endeavors of solidarity that address these challenges. So I hope these 3 days will be the platform where we engage not only in formulating some of the inequalities, new inequalities that await us, but also some of the good examples and examples of solidarity. So I'd like to thank our Gearing Roles team, Guru, Ayşegül, and İlayda, for launching this fascinating project. And I look very much forward to the lectures and vibrant discussions to follow. Thank you all for joining us.
Thank you very much, Hülya, Adak. We are also very much looking forward to our discussions today and in the next few days. And dear guests, I now invite our next speaker, Maria Silvestre Cabrera, who's the academic coordinator of the Gearing Roles project. She's a professor of social and human sciences at the University of Deusto, a former dean of the political science and sociology faculties, a former director also of the Basque Institute of Women. She will be giving you a brief introduction about the project and its aims. Thank you, Maria. The floor is yours now.
Thank you, Guru. Tunay'din. Good afternoon, and thank you very much for attending Gearing Roles' second annual conference, Gender and Leadership in Higher Education and Research, hosted by Sabancı University in Istanbul. I want to thank the assistance of the authorities who are joining us in this institutional panel. It's a real shame that we cannot meet physically in the beautiful city of Istanbul, or visit its precious corners, or savor its gastronomy, but surely this online version will allow us to share, debate, and grow. I'm the responsible for briefly presenting the Gearing Roles project. Gearing Roles is a strong multidisciplinary consortium of 10 European academic and non-academic partners. Gearing Roles is implementing 6 new gender equality plans in 5 European universities: Instituto de Geografía y Ordenamiento del Territorio de la Universidad de Lisboa, Università Ljubljana, Sabancı Universitesi, Oxford Brookes University, University of Deusto, and in the Estonian Research Council, following the steps described in the GEAR tool: define, plan, act, and check, to achieve a structural change in JIP implementing institutions with the firm objective of challenging and transforming gender roles and identities linked to professional careers and work towards real institutional change. The JIP implementing partners are supported by 3 non-academic partners: Yellow Window, Trilateral Research, and FECIT as a member of Euraxis, that bring into the consortium key expertise and sound experience. JIP implementing institutions also received the feedback from Radboud University, an experienced university in charge of external project evaluation and impact assessment. Gearing Roles will contribute to increase the number of European research organizations implementing JIPs, not only by direct implementation, but also by spreading lessons learned throughout to other research institutions and key stakeholders. Moreover, each consortium member exchanges expertise and disseminates experiences to national networks of other organizations. Gearing Roles partners contribute to the increase of women participating in research by fostering their career progression through mentoring and training activities, analyzing possibilities for diversifying professional paths, and promoting open, transparent, and merit-based recruitment processes. Our focus is on the deconstruction of sexual roles in order to unveil often unconscious gender biases that operate in processes of decision-making, selection, and promotion of people, and in their attribution of value and recognition. Our main objective is to promote a structural change in SIGGIP implementing research and education institutions through the development of self-tailored action plans. A structural change is both a political and a technical process. It involves new ways of policy making, shifts in organizational and institutional culture, and shifts in behavior of the academic community. Gearing roles targets the questioning and transformation of traditional gender roles at the micro, meso, and macro levels, with three main objectives related to female career progression: gender mainstreaming in education and research, and leadership and decision-making. This second conference focuses on leadership and decision-making. The purpose is to provide knowledge from institutional and personal experience and detect forms of exercise of power that allow a more equal, diverse, mainstream, and inclusive participation that can help institutions to improve gender equality and representative leadership. I would highlight two issues related to leadership. On the one hand, the idea of feminist leadership as a leadership defined by inclusiveness and diversity, as a leadership that seeks social justice. And on the other hand, I think it could be very useful to reflect on resistances to gender equality and its causes, especially from the point of view of those who hold positions and responsibilities. We hope that all of you enjoyed the conference that should help us to improve the way of facing decision-making attending gender dimension. I want to end by thanking the University of Sabancı for organizing the conference, and especially our colleagues, Ayse Gul Altinais, Gul Rugoker, and Ilaida Eseoba. Thank you, the secular.
Thank you so much, Maria Silvestre Cabrera.